Welcome to part 9 in this series of videos where we will be creating a birthday reminders application using Blazor and C#. In this video, we'll be looking at updating and deleting records. For both editing and deleting records, the user will need to select a record from the data grid. We must check that they have selected a record and warn them if they haven't. If they haven't, we will use the warning component that we've already created to do this. If they have selected a record, we need to get the ID of that record so we can then deal with it. In the case of editing, there is still a possibility of a duplicate being created. Again, we must amend the update stored procedure to prevent this, and then the follow-on of the person service and the iPerson service. In the case of deleting, we want to help prevent the user from deleting the wrong record, and we will do this by displaying a pop-up dialog to ask the user to confirm that they really want to delete the record selected. We will use a new modal dialog to achieve this. I'm going to start by looking at preventing duplicates for updating a record. And as before, I'm going to be using the SQL to be the main check on duplicate prevention. Let's have a look at the SQL. Currently, this is the stored procedure for updating a record. We pass in the parameters of the ID, first name, last name, date of birth, and who to send the reminder to. And then we update the person table with the first name where it equals the first name being passed in, and so on and so forth. This will allow duplicates to be created. And I'm proposing to change this or replace it with this version. And this is similar. First of all, I'm going to drop the existing stored procedure and create the new one, passing in the same parameters as before. But I'm going to declare an integer variable called result value. Then we begin a transaction. And what we're trying to do here is do a select. So we're going to select from the person table where the criteria is that the person's first name matches, the last name matches, the date of birth matches, and send the reminder to matches, but the person ID is not the one that we're actually dealing with. If it finds a record that already exists, that's going to be a duplicate, so it sets the result value to 99. On the other hand, if it doesn't find an existing record that matches the parameters, it does the update. And in this case, it sets the result value to @error, which happens to be 0. We then check if the result is not 0, it'll roll back. If it is 0, it'll commit the transaction, and then it'll return the result value to the calling code. So that's the stored procedure. We now need to deal with the C# code so that we handle this correctly. In person service, we have got the async task, which is currently a Boolean for doing a person update. And this is the code that we've got here. I'm going to replace this, and you'll notice that one of the things that's going to get replaced is the Boolean is going to be changed to an integer. So let me just replace this code with the revised code. This is the revised code, and as you can see, is now a task of type integer. We're passing in the person object as before, but I'm declaring a variable called success as an integer, and I'm setting it to 0. We're then using the connection to the database and passing in the parameters as before, but in addition, we've got return value, which parameter direction is return value. Then I'm running the stored procedure and setting the success variable to be the return value from the stored procedure. I'm then returning success to the calling method, and we'll come on to that a little bit later. The next thing we need to do is, because we've changed the task type from a Boolean to an integer, we just need to change the iPerson service. So update, that goes to integer. So at this stage, all I've done is to make sure that we don't create any duplicates, but I haven't actually touched the index page yet. So let's have a look at the index page. As I've previously mentioned, the first thing we need to do is to be able to identify a user clicking on a particular row within the data grid. And to do this, we need to replace these grid events with one that includes clicking of a record or a row select. So let me replace this. This is the revised grid events, and as you can see, we've got a row selected attribute or event, and when that happens, we're going to be using the row selected handler method, which we've yet to define, to deal with this. Once a record has been selected, we need to identify the ID of that particular row, and we'll be using that ID to update the individual record. So I need to define or declare a variable, and so let's go and do that now. I'll add the declaration down at the bottom here. And it's a GUID because the ID of the person is a GUID. I'm calling it selected person ID, and I'm initially setting it to an empty GUID. The next thing we need to do is to add the row handler to get this selected person ID. So I'll add that at the bottom of the code. And this is the code for the row select handler. It's a void, and all it really does is read the arguments being passed in by the row selected event and assigning the selected person ID. Now we've got the row selected, we need to add something to the toolbar for the edit. Which is here. It's the toolbar handler. So this is going to be dealing with where the user clicks the edit button having selected a record. So let's insert the code that we need there. So this is the revised code. So when the user clicks the edit button, we check that a person has been selected. So if selected person ID equals empty, i.e. it hasn't changed, the user hasn't selected a record, we're going to use our warning dialog to say, warning, please select a contact from the grid. Otherwise, we're going to populate the person add edit, which is a temporary data set used for editing the process, and we're going to be calling the dialog add edit person, which is the same as for adding a person, but in this case we will put the header text as edit contact, and we will pre-populate the person add edit object by going and getting the record from the database using the person ID. So that will bring up the person record on the dialog. The next stage is to change the person save. So down here we've got the person save, and in all cases we're checking that the person's date of birth is not in the future. And we're also checking they're not more than 105 years old. If the person edit person ID is empty, we know that they're adding a record. Otherwise, we're editing the record. So I'll paste in the code that we need here for where the person is being edited. So here I'm declaring an integer variable called success, and I'm then calling the person update, and I'm passing into it the revised data that we've got. If success does not equal 0, the person already exists, and we're warning the user that the person already exists, but we're actually leaving the dialog open. Sorry, we're opening the dialog, but we're not actually closing the dialog where the data is being edited, so the user can see what the problem is. If success is 0 and it's been updated correctly, we're going to revise the person list. So we're updating the grid, and we're going to close the dialog. We don't actually need that, so I'll just get rid of that. And that should be it. Let's save everything and see if it works. So here is our grid, and I think the first thing I'll test is I'm not going to select a record, and I'm going to click Edit. And it says, please select a contact from the grid. So that's good. So let's just change one. This one looks likely. Looks like I've mistyped the name there. So if I click Edit, right, that's fine. So that edits correctly. Let's choose this one, and I'll just give it a first name, but I'll leave the last name blank. I'm still getting error messages there, as I would expect. I'm going to cancel that. David Brown. I'm just looking to create a duplicate. Right, I'm going to edit this one and make it John Smith. It'll be exactly the same as this one up here because it's got the same date of birth. So let's edit that. And it allowed it. And this is where I realise that I didn't run the stored procedure. I explained it, but didn't run it. So let's execute it. Let's go back to the code and try again. That one, if I edit that, it says the person already exists, it cannot be added again. The perils of doing a demonstration. Right, now I think I've got everything working correctly. We'll move on to deleting a record. For deleting a record, we'll be checking that the user has selected a row from the grid as before, and then once they have selected it, we won't be opening the dialog box that we're currently using to add or edit a record. What I want to do is to open a separate dialog box or a different dialog box asking for confirmation that they wish to continue to delete the record. So I'm now going to add that, and I'm going to put it immediately underneath the existing dialog boxes that we've got up at the top. So I'm going to put it in here. So this is the code for the dialog box where we're going to be asking for confirmation that we want a record deleted. I'm giving it a name, dialog delete person, It's modal. I've given it the same width as the other dialogues. I'm showing the close icon and I'm setting its visibility to false. In the template, I'm giving it a header, which I'm hard coding as confirm delete. That's all I'm going to be using this for. And I'm going to have two text boxes. Both are going to be set to enabled false, so the user won't be able to change anything. I think that probably should say first name there. And that should be last name. So I'm showing the first name and last name just so the user knows who we're about to delete. I'm then going to ask them, please to confirm that you want to delete the record, and I've got two buttons with on-click events of confirm delete or confirm delete yes or confirm delete no. So we've got a couple of things to do here. We need to declare this dialog in the declarations, and then we need two methods to handle this. So we'll start by declaring the dialog. So I'll move down to the declarations and I'll just paste that in. And now we need the two methods for confirming delete or confirming delete no, confirming delete yes or confirming delete no. And I'm going to put those at the very bottom. So these are the two new methods. Confirm delete no is just going to hide the dialog box, and it's going to change the selected person ID back to empty. This is so that once the user has clicked no, that person ID isn't still held in memory should the user by accident click edit or delete. We want them to select a different record. If they confirm that they do want to delete, we are declaring a Boolean called success, and it's going to await the person delete service. If success is false, and there's no reason why it should be, but it might be, we're using our warning dialog box to say warning, unknown error has occurred, the record has not been deleted. Otherwise, we're going to hide the delete person dialog. We're going to refresh the person list, and again we're setting person add edit to a new person, and selected person ID is an empty GUID. I don't think that's strictly necessary. Maybe I'll comment that out. But there's one thing we haven't done, and that is we haven't changed the toolbar to actually call any of this. So the toolbar handler, we need the code in here for the event when the user clicks the delete button. So I'll paste that in. So this is the toolbar handler for the delete button. So first of all, we're checking that the user has selected a row from the grid and that the selected person ID is not empty. If it is, we'll give them a warning. Otherwise, we open our new dialog box called dialog delete person. We're getting person add edit, and we're getting it for the one person from the selected person ID. With that all in place, we should now be able to delete. Let's have a go. So here's our data, and we should now be able to select a row. Why don't I select some of this rubbish data? Select delete. It asks me to confirm that I want to delete it. I'll say yes. And that row has now disappeared. I should now be able to click delete, and it should tell me I haven't got a row selected, which is the case, so that's good. And I think those are the two main things that could go wrong with this. So let's choose another one. And we've got duplicates down here, so I'll delete those as well. So delete all seems to be working nicely. With that all in place, our users can now add, edit and delete their friends and family, but we haven't got round to sending emails yet to tell them about forthcoming birthdays, and that'll be the subject of our next video. So thank you very much for watching this. I'll put the code changes or a link to the code changes in the description to the video, together with any other links that I think might be helpful. Thank you very much.